Okay, so just to give you guys a little bit of background, several years ago, about 2009, CDOT experienced about $500,000 of fuel theft because we didn't have a very good, tight control over our fuel purchases and our credit cards. And we had an inside man and two outside men conspiring and collaborating to create fuel cards, duplicate fuel cards, and they were using those cars to get fuel, and then they turn around and take the fuel to a truck stop and sell it to truck drivers. So they were making some pretty good money on that deal. And that led, of course, to a Colorado Bureau of Investigation diving in and looking at what's going on, audits, and you guys know all the pain that comes from something like that. So fast forward to what Bill has accomplished over the past, what have you been here, almost 3 years with us now, working on 3 years. So Bill's built a pretty good fuel control network using our AVL systems and working with our credit card vendors and working with our fuel coordinators that are out in the regions and the sections. Now we're at a point where it's maybe 0.1% of our fuel transactions might throw a red flag that we need to look at something, and usually those turn out to be it's just, okay, that was justified. It wasn't illicit activity. But, something we needed to verify to be sure. But I'll let Bill elaborate a little bit on how we do that. So without further ado, Mr. Bill Houghland.
Well, like Chris said, I'm Bill Houghland. I'm officially CDOT's fuel coordinator. I've been with CDOT now just over 3 years. My background is the oil business. I've been in every sector of the oil business, from drilling for the stuff to marketing the end products. And so this is kind of my retirement job from the private sector. The public sector is a little less stressful, but I have enjoyed, and it's a great opportunity here. So as I say in my thing, we're going to look a little bit. Chris kind of covered our fraud problem we ran into a few years ago. I'd like to also cover what we're doing right now in regards to various fuels, various other activities, environmental responses that we're doing for our as a response of our governor and our leadership. And then probably the most important part is what's going on in the future that we're having to look at and that we're considering that's being put forward to us. So a little background on our fuel business. We create fuel pins and we manage fueling activity for 3,000 employees. We have 3,000 pieces of heavy equipment, and each one of those has its own fuel card. We then also have 900 we call them state fleet vehicles. The heavy fleet is owned by CDOT. Our state fleet vehicles, the light sedans, light trucks, are owned by the state, and we lease them back from them, but we're still responsible for the fuel transactions with them. We buy fuel throughout the state. There's about 1,200 gas stations that we monitor fuel purchases from. We're in the process of managing our bulk fuel. We are under a request to expand our bulk fuel due to there's good reasons for us to have bulk fuel out in the public. And we do about 1 million gallons. It was a little less than that. We're slowly increasing our fueling through the bulk stations. And then overall, we do about 125,000 fuel transactions a year. And my one of my primary jobs is fraud mitigation. And so I'm looking at these things on a daily basis, looking for anomalies or illegal action usage of our the fuel credit cards. And for us, 90% of our fuel is diesel, so you'll see most of my talk this morning is addressed around biodiesel, diesel fuels, some of the impact there.
When you say bulk fuel, so that's your own CDOT fuel sites?
Yes, sir.
So you're actually wanting to increase your number of fuel sites?
Yes, sir. Well, and we're doing that. So we have, with the dispersal of our patrols and our operations, we have a lot of towns where there's only one fueling source to us. And so what we're concerned about is at those locations running out of fuel, running out of power to operate it. And we're setting up, when we add to these locations, we're bringing in our own tanks so we have an alternative fuel supply. One of the key things is we've got to have flexibility in our supply of our diesel. Our annual fuel budget's around $10 million. That's gross, net's 45 cents less than that a gallon. We get all of our state taxes. Our federal taxes are not billed to us by US Bank. State taxes, we have to apply to the state for a reimbursement of the state fuel taxes, which is about 20 cents a gallon. US Bank's our vendor for our fuel cards, and we use those cards in both our bulk fuel facilities as well as through our private or the retail stores that we're visiting. That contract was started about 3 years ago through the state. They joined the Sourcewell or NJPA contract that was established by I believe Washington. That's coming up for bid the current contract ends back in December where are we, 2020? So we're starting to work on a new contract there. We've had some issues with Voyager from their operational standpoint that I'll kind of touch on a little bit further down the road. And I say we've got 6 sections. We actually have 5 sections, 5 regions and 8 sections. Each one of these regions and sections have their own fuel coordinators that I work with to resolve any fueling discrepancies.
A question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that their only job or?
No.
Okay.
No, and now, it used to be a large project. So in the past, our requirements after the fraud hit us back in 2009, we required every driver to retain all their paper receipts. They put them into an envelope. They handed that to a fuel coordinator who then compared those receipts to the envelope to the Voyager invoice. Any discrepancies had to be addressed. When we went with Voyager, and it was occurring already, is we've gone to electronic receipts, eliminated all the paper. So I think we figured out it saved us about $30,000 just in printing the envelopes every year, as well as the retention of the documents. Yes, sir.
Do you link the employee to the transaction?
Yes. Yeah, our credit cards are linked to the truck, and each one of our drivers has a fuel pin. And those fuel pins it's what Karen and Susan, who are here, and myself, we manage those fuel pins. And that's right now with the fraud and the skimmers going on right now, huge time consumer of us. But it's that way we can track every driver back to every transaction, back to every store. Just an idea, you may have seen this already, but each one of my sections, or these are our maintenance sections, but everybody has their own 2 or 3 fuel coordinators that I work with, and they would be broken up into maintenance or engineering or traffic sections for us. So Chris covered this. We got hit for about $400,000. Good news is we did get most of our money back through an insurance claim, but it's still, even though we're only a $10 million cost out of the whole CDOT budget of about $1.6 billion, very small percentage, but it's very highly visible, especially when you get hit with that kind of money. What we're doing now, our fraud mitigation, 1 card per vehicle, 1 driver pin, and each truck has an ABL system in it that we're using, and we match those transactions, truck, driver, location. And our trucks are all set up with their gallon limits as well as their product, authorized product that they can purchase. All of these things, we get reports that come back and tell us if, say a truck that shows up as, it is diesel, but it shows up as gasoline purchase. My coordinators have to investigate and find out what's going on. That happens quite a bit, but it's usually the fault of our retailers. We find that they'll go out and they have their point of sale people come in and fix something. They change the coding, and all of a sudden the diesel sale shows up as gasoline. That is also one of the indicators we use in regards to external fraud is product types. Every week we run these reports, and so each fuel coordinator gets an email on Monday morning, says you've got 2 exceptions to address. If they don't address them, it goes to the top of the chain right off the bat. But the RTD is informed immediately of questionable transactions.
Hey, Bill, how many exceptions did we have before this system that we currently use was implemented as compared to what we have now?
Yeah, so initially when this rolled out back in 2015, we were seeing as many as 1,000 exceptions a week. Yeah, it was just a huge time-sucking issue. And I think the reduction now, I think last week we had 12. Or, yeah, 12 I think it was. But the reduction in that is a combination of one, I think the big one is driver education. They know what we're doing, they know we're watching. It's just they're more careful about what they're doing now. Plus, we're eliminating the handwriting of reading that fuel ticket, putting it on a fuel log, someone else having to read that handwriting. And all of that manual input just creates a vast opportunity for miscommunication. So we've gone to electronic transactions, and Voyager, every week, we have an electronic file that I can pull up all of the details on any question or any transaction for that matter. As an example, right now we're seeking reimbursement for our support of the U.S. Forest Service with our fires. Down in Durango, we supplied, I think 15 bulldozers as well as heavy equipment and the people. And so we're able to justify that cost, send it back to the Forest Service for reimbursement. And so for the 18-19 fire season, or 17-18 fire season, we're looking at about $160,000 reimbursement, which I'm trying to keep that money myself, but we'll see how that one turns out.
So for the doses, are you doing a slip tank then? And they're just
Yeah.
doing the car, and you're assuming all the fuel in the slip tank is going to the dozer?
Yes. Well, and that card that we've assigned, we call them auxiliary fuel tanks. They're 1,500 gallon tank in the back of a 1 ton. And in general, most of that fuel is pumped into that one piece of equipment. Now, there's going to be a little bit here and there, but out of 1 million gallons, it's hard to find 10 that's misallocated. But that's also road graders, and then if there's any road equipment that's filling up at retail units, those were brought into the system, and then all the transactions from our bulk fuel system were also brought in.
I have a question on the card, so I understand. So each vehicle has a card, and then each driver has a PIN. So a driver can use several different cards. Depending on what vehicle they're in, they use the card that goes with that vehicle, and then they use their PINs assigned to them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it works well.
What's the time frame with Voyager, we use Voyager 2, to put that pin and get the new person into the system? Or, I don't know how often your people would forget their pin, but I'm sure ours would.
Yeah, they do. But we create pins within just a couple minutes.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, it's Voyager, it's a very simple process. One of our challenges is that because we have state fleet vehicles, that's a separate state department, they have their own account. So I have to work through another department for them to create fuel pins. And they've given me certain rights that I can go in and do certain things on their account, but they're very restrictive. They don't want me messing with their business. Conversely, I don't want them messing in my business either. But that's one of our challenges, so I create a fuel pin automatically. The computer generates that new pin. We take that pin and apply it to our state fleet account. But Voyager, our big challenge with Voyager, and one of the reasons that we're seeking a new contract, is they've implemented a new policy that says $150 limit per purchase. So I've got my snow plows, they've got a 100-gallon tank. You pull up to the retail unit and you put in $3 gas, he's gonna have at least 2 purchases. Then if he buys some DEF out there on the side, I've now got 3 purchases to track. So what it's doing is creating more transactions for us to keep up with. Voyager says they have no way to change that. The other vendors, our former vendor, WEX, they tell us they've been able to create a gallon limit as opposed to a dollar limit on the transaction. But we'll see. Yes, sir.
Well, it's just on Greg's point, one of the ways we've mitigated that is each of them has an employee ID card to access to the facility. First 6 numbers of that employee ID card is their PIN number.
What's on your ID card?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we all did, it was a year ago where US Bank came out and said that if you've got a Voyager and you don't use it within a certain amount of time, we're gonna shut it off. And that's their fraud protection, and it's not really Voyager, it's US Bank doing this.
Right.
And so we, I think collectively with the states pushed back and said, we're not doing that, and then they relaxed that, that part of it. I don't know that I have a $150 limit on my Voyager.
They're trying, so the way the credit cards work is Voyager, Visa, MasterCard, they all have their own merchant agreement that goes to that retailer. Officially, it's a no, they can't talk about it. So the merchant cannot tell me what's written in his contract by the way that contract is written. And there's a big lawsuit out there about swipe fees. And swipe fees, every merchant pays around 3% to process your credit cards. With Voyager, it's closer to 4.5%. And so the merchants are not they're not very Voyager friendly. So, but Voyager came out and said, you have to implement this $150 limit to minimize the fraud occurrence. And that's where the merchants have that option not to abide by it, but they're going to be stuck with any potential fraud that would occur on the card. So most of them are taking it on, but only as they sign new contracts.
Do you or anybody else that uses Voyager have rural or small mom and pop gas stations that just won't take Voyager?
Yes.
What do you do for them? Just
My guys find another
just
station.
go in there?
Yeah, we don't have a choice. And it's one of those things, they get restricted because of that 4.5% fee. We've got some big operators here. One of them, Peerless Tire, and they had 30-some, 40-some stores here. They won't take our car. So I've talked with him about it, he and I chatted, and that's where he was like, 4.5% is a huge chunk of change out of my margins. So they just said they're not gonna do it. Now Wex's is a little bit lower, but just a little bit, but it's more palpable to the retailers. And with our Fuel Master system, we're able to use that same card, which is really nice, being able to use this card in our Fuel Master system, so I don't have 2 credit cards. So any truck can go to, hope that's not me. So any truck can go to any of my bulk fuel facilities now, as long as, if it's got diesel. No, I've got one gasoline bulk tank, and that's at our, the tunnel up at I-70 at Eisenhower Tunnel.
Same card, internal fuel, commercial fuel, which is one card.
Yeah, we use the same, we've got the same controls, card to the truck, pin to the driver, and it works well for us. Gives us that control. We've recently finished up a program of importing all of my bulk fuel transactions into our internal accounting systems. It's never been done before. So we've actually changed our entire procurement process and who owns the fuel at these bulk fuel facilities. In the past, each one of our sections would go and fill up their own tank. It came out of their operating budget, and so they were very resistant to me sending a truck from another section in there to fill up. What we've done is now the state owns that fuel, and so we bill it from there. That patrol actually gets, or that truck gets billed for that fuel. So there's much more free flow of equipment, better utilization, less driving around. And being our bulk fuel's about 50 cents, well, 35 to 50 cents cheaper, it's saving us some money in the long run. This is just a simple sample of what on every Monday gives us an overview of the transactions. This is just a monthly view. Down at the bottom gives us our gallons that we've purchased. This is all strictly on our retail side. We will be incorporating the bulk fuel into this, but computer systems being what they are and the state being what it is, it's a little slow for me to get all of my fuel data into one site yet, but it'll happen. We're getting ready to start my next phase of our bulk fuel data integration right now. External fraud, that's the skimmers on the gas pumps. Right now, that's one of my biggest headaches. So our credit cards through Voyager, they're restricted to in-state purchases. No out-of-state card or transactions are allowed. And that works 99.9% of the time. I don't know how one or two of them do get through, but they do. But that helps us immensely in regards to the stolen credit cards. So every morning I'm downloading all of our fuel transactions or attempted transactions, somewhere around 1,000 a day, give or take, and watching for those out-of-state transactions, over limits, over gallons, things of that nature. And then I address those, especially the potential fraudulent ones, out-of-state transactions immediately. I don't think we've lost any money to skimmers yet. And everybody knows what a skimmer is, right? So, just in case, a skimmer is a device that the thieves, they attach to the card reader at the gas pump, and it reads the credit card, and then that thief can come in, download that credit card data, create his own credit card, and sell that number on the web. Back in December, we had about 30 cards captured at a gas station up in the mountains. And I think it was about 3 days later, we saw a rash of attempted purchases out in California. The state fleet. Yeah, California seems to be the place that has it's our hotbed for stolen cars. I don't know why. But my state fleet side, yes, sir.
So, just thinking of our system, are your fuel pins for your employees, is it tied to Voyager, to where Voyager authenticates that fuel pin
Yes.
as well?
Yes, sir.
So basically, when they stole your fuel card number, they somehow got an applicable employee pin number as well.
Yeah, and we think that there was a camera mounted somewhere that watched that driver put in his pin. We have not seen an electronic capture of the fuel pins yet. I suspect they're out there. We just haven't been hit with it that we're aware of. And you'll hear me say I'm aware of it. One of my last slides down here, if someone's smart and stealing from us, they're not going to go out and buy 600 gallons of fuel. And that's actually what the guys in California tried to do. I don't know what they took up there, but they authorized 600 gallons purchased. And it was, in this case, they were trying to buy gasoline. My card was set for diesel. But as soon as I saw all these California transactions, and there's 5 or 6 stores there that they use regularly. Those were easy to find. It's the ones where they're buying what would be considered a regular transaction, 25 gallons, matching the product. That's the one I'm concerned about, because those could come through and I wouldn't see them when I'm looking at, on a daily basis, 1,000 transactions. So far, and my son's a cop, as he says, most carts are stupid, which is why we catch them. He doesn't think very highly of them, obviously. But it's the ones that don't abuse that opportunity to steal that I'm really concerned about. The big ones we're going to catch. The small ones are the ones that I'm trying to figure out how to do it.
Do you ever get to the point in your data where you can get miles per gallon per vehicle or
Yeah.
gallons per hour?
Yeah, that's all part of when my drivers buy fuel, they put in their PIN and the odometer. Our challenge is odometers, it's a manually entered system. And a 127 all of a sudden becomes a 712. And so we're trying to use the electronic data as part of our utilization. But the odometer, misreading odometers is one of our biggest headaches. Because you try to come back to that driver saying, well, what should you have put in there? Well, I don't know. I mean, they've filled up the truck 4 times in the meantime.
You can't get that through GPS? Is that why?
Well, we can, but with the Colorado problems that we run into is when that truck does a hairpin, we're only taking GPS readings about every 5 seconds or we find that you cut corners where they make a right-hand turn, we're losing miles. But it would be a good beginning, and that's one of the things that we're in our next phase of my bulk fuel program that we'll look at incorporating. But GPS is just, for odometer readings, we're gonna have to reset it at least once a year, set that odometer on the computer. But, yeah.
We tried that, Chris, and it was very cumbersome, because it was a timing issue too. So did they just fuel up and then you figured out fuel mileage, or at the time you ran the data with, you know, so it's not an exact science of, you have an instantaneous odometer reading and how much fuel was there, how much did they start with, how much, it's the timing of when you run the miles per gallon that's challenging.
I was thinking that if you did it, you know, I was looking at that, when you pick up that ADL data, when you put fuel in the vehicle, that could be when you have your okay, I know what's the mileage, and I'm gonna look at mileage next time I do a fuel fill, and that would give you a, you know, from point to point.
So we try to do a range too, because it depends on, you know, city driving, freeway driving, so kind of a percentage, but it was, we've got some other stuff in place now. That type of system for us was pretty cumbersome. We don't have GPS on every light vehicle.
That's our big problem, is you look at the age of our fleets, and only the newest stuff, like 2005, 2006, do we have that capability to use an electronic odometer. And our fleet's not that new. So as we modernize the fleet, upgrade that fleet, we will have better access to it. But if it's only pulling 30% of your fleet, you've got another 60% that's gonna be a question that you have to investigate. And with there being only myself and Karen and Susan to try to do some of this stuff, it gets very time consuming. And I'm not sure that the payoff is worth us spending, we could spend all day long doing that when I've got other activities I'm supposed to be performing. But it is something we're looking at, that it's gonna take a while for that to be through our system deep enough for us to really take advantage of it. This is the thing I found that really drove me crazy in California when we got hit. So we called the Secret Service, because when you steal a card here, you use it in another state, it becomes a federal crime. And when I talked to the Secret Service, he goes, "What'd you get hit for?" And I had $2,500. He goes, "Add about 6 more zeros to that number, and I'll take your case on it. Otherwise, don't bother." And it's that way across the board. I mean, it's not a big enough crime for them to assign people to. And I can tell them where, when, who. I can get them down to the moment when that gas card was used at that gas station. But again, it's gonna take resources that they just don't have for a small crime like that. Now, in the state, we're fortunate, and I just did this week, is Voyager sent us a notice of cars being compromised. And there was about 10 or 12 trucks involved, credit cards involved. So I looked at all my transactions for the past up to January, and I found one gas station that there's only one gas station they all went to. So I called up the Vail police, he goes out, opens up every pump, and they don't find the equipment. But at least the police are willing to put the effort out and make an attempt to try to find the skimmer. And these things, the skimmers, they're getting more advanced. They're now moving into Bluetooth skimmers. So they don't even have to, they open the pump up once, they attach a device, they close it, lock it back up, put their fraud detection tape that you buy online, tape it back over so it's never been opened. And here we go, we're off to the races. And at least when I can identify a local store, I do get the local police involved. But in general, this could have been going on back in February when they captured these cards. So it's one of those things I have to battle with the fraud piece of it. This is one everybody's going to be near and dear to. So our governor this started actually back in 2007. Our government asked us to begin a green initiative, reducing fuel consumption, things of that nature. Governor Hickenlooper a couple years ago He came out and said, reduce fuel consumption based on 2015 by 20% by 2020. In the executive order, there's no exclusion for weather operations. So when we have a heavy winter like we did last year, they still expected a 4% decrease from the prior year. Well, we didn't make it last year. But our executive order, again, they're looking at all the state buildings. They want water, they want paper, every day. It's entire, I'm not the only one having to suffer through this. So it's, everybody's reporting this back to a Green Government Council, who reports back to the state, who reports to the public. The weather, that's one that in our next round with our newest governor, we think, we haven't seen the document, we've provided guidance that there has to be an exclusion for weather. So we have to keep the roads clear and safe. It's going to take more gas when you have a heavy load. You're going to take more torque and reduce your fuel economy just to keep the traveling public, in our case, getting up to Vail and go skiing. Our winter operations group gave me this slide, and at the far right you can see our fiscal 19. We had 154 days of snow operations, which is way above where we've been in the past. 2015 is where we had our baseline. And so we were pretty luckily, 15, 16, 17, 18 was looking real good. We're doing a great job reducing our fuel consumption. This is the green bar shows our goal, what we're supposed to meet. The upper part's supposed to be orange, red, whatever, that's my state fleet vehicles. The lower parts are CDOT vehicles. So we were well on track with meeting this until last year. Now, the good news is, fiscal 19, we were up only 9% versus where we should have been. And the weather, we were up 4% where we have it here. Our increase in fuel consumption was not as much as the increase in days of snow operations. So I think we did a pretty good job of running this better than we had in the past. But the current executive order we're operating under, there's no exclusion for that. So we still are going to get our hands back.
Will you see an increase as you do more construction projects on the engineering side for gas?
Well, on the gasoline side, it's such a small piece of our component because we're only doing the engineers that are overseeing the project. We don't build anything, or, well, we build very little ourselves. So it doesn't affect us that much. And it's an easier one to control. An engineer does not have to be on site if it's raining or snowing. And he won't be on site if it's snowing or raining. Where my trucks are out pushing snow off the road. So it's, the engineers, we can put all sorts of controls on them because it's not a safe operation issue, other than their safety to stay off the road.
I'm curious, does California or anybody else have an exemption for weather? In Washington, we don't. We have the same reduced fuel, but we have no exemption. For
No, there's no exemption.
operational tempo or floods or, you know.
But we are reducing petroleum, and I think it's probably attributed to the EVs and the hybrids, the light-duty fleet, and renewable diesel and biodiesel.
You know, and one of the things that our executive order, the 2020 report, as I call it, they were measuring petroleum only. So that means on my gasoline, all the gas in Colorado was oxygenated to 10%. So I only reported 90% of my use. Well, when you put 90% to all your miles, it really looks good. It makes no sense to do that. So when we're going forward in our next one, we're trying to get it apples to apples. Look at all the fuel consumption by our equipment against all the miles. Because the actual report, they talk about fuel consumption per vehicle. Well, but if you have more people in one truck to be more efficient using of your equipment, your fuel economy is going to decrease. But you're only driving one truck rather than two. But that isn't taken into account in how they report these back to our green government. It goes back, and I am happy to say the fleet department was not involved in writing that 2020 guidelines. They kind of did it without their inclusion. So a lot of these simple concepts were excluded from the considerations. This one here just shows our fuel economy. The last two on the right, the year-to-date, those are comparisons, 19 year-to-date. In this case, it's only July. So in July of 19, we were about 3.9. We're almost at 4% in July of this year. So we're doing a little better month over month. And you kind of see where we've been able to increase our fuel economy through a multitude of items. Big one, immediate, was the reduction of idle. That's probably been, it's the low-hanging fruit that you can manage. We pick up that information through our AVL systems. We're using Zonar on our heavy equipment. We can capture that information and take action when we see misuse or misapplication of the equipment. Our AVL systems with the idle time utilization, we're in the process, we're pulling out underutilized 1 tons, putting them where we need them, putting supervisors in half tons or in sedans as necessary. Because there's no reason, we've got, and Chris and Howard can talk about it, we've got pickups that have never had a shovel in the back of it. But our engineers need a pickup. And their supervisor says they need a pickup.
They need a lot of things.
So that's where it goes up to our director, and that's one of those high-level arguments that those people can have against each other. I don't have to get involved with it other than reporting it. And then the other thing that we've benefited from down at the bottom, the modernizing of the fleet. One of the things, and there I think everybody will see this, the earlier equipment that was designed for number 2 diesel or low sulfur diesel didn't have those emission scrubbers on it. And they were relatively efficient equipment. As you can see back there, the 15 years older and plus, it's actually higher than the equipment we're seeing today. But when they started implementing the scrubbers and the DEF systems, I mean, there were multiple systems that they were trying, it hurt the fuel economy because they weren't optimized for that equipment. Now that we're getting into they understand the systems much better, the equipment runs more efficiently. So we're trending up our newest equipment, we're just barely up. But when you're looking at 1,000 trucks and you're getting 0.2 of a mile better, it's a good start.
How did you get the data to do that?
Creative math 101. No, we took all our fleet list and the age. We keep track of the age of the equipment. And because I have credit cards by truck, I can see how much fuel a truck that was 10 years old burned, and I can put them into categorization. And so one of the key things, the snow plows, it's the one that everybody sees and kind of keeps an eye on, and we consider it's our exempt equipment.
Well, this is a great chart, and we, when we try to justify getting money for replacement, we always kind of throw in a little, phrase that says newer equipment's more fuel efficient, but we have nothing to back it up. And so I think this is great in that regard. That's why I asked the question.
I can show you. You've got to have good background data on your equipment. That's the key thing. And as much as we despise our accounting system called SAP, it keeps historical records. And so we've got the age of the equipment. We've got their reported odometers and things like that. And so it's a bunch of number crunching, but I could stand behind these numbers in front of anybody and say, that's what they are.
If you overlay that with an air quality chart, it would be the reverse. So for us, it's more important for the air quality than the fuel mileage.
Yeah. And we usually say those two phrases and lower repair costs and all that stuff, but I like having the data to show that.
Yes. And And but even your modern equipment's has less emissions. Now, but there's gonna be additional problems that you run in on the new fuels. Biodiesel, one, it's short supply. There's a lot of problems. I'll get into biodiesel in a minute. But yeah, it's a good clear chart showing at least an improvement. That's what we have to be able to show. Kind of continuing on that line, so this is a distribution of our age of our equipment on our snow plows. So you'll notice, we've got almost an equal amount of very old equipment and brand new equipment. And then we've got this range in there between 6 and 14 years old that we're slowly moving down. So that comes back to that kind of this whole data set that we're looking at. So when I looking again, kind of continuing on that line, so last year, this is for fiscal 19 that ended in July or June. By year, these are the fuel economy by age of equipment. Now, a couple things that you have to keep in mind on this one is, in general, our older equipment is not used as much. The drivers want to drive the new equipment, which is a good thing for fuel economy, but it slows down their moving into the replacement plan to be replaced. The newer equipment, better fuel economy, and you can see it's across the board, both, not just our, the brown bars, whatever those are, that's our snowplows. The gray is my entire on-road fleet. We exclude our off-road, the bulldozers, Caterpillar, graders, things like that. They're excluded from fuel economy just because there's not the hours, gallons per hour would just skew this chart way off the schedule. Leads us into bulk fuel, our future, kind of what we're doing forward, this part that I think probably is best for discussion. We're still under the guide for additional fuel reductions. Some of the new fuels that we're addressing and we're looking at, the new payment methods for credit cards, and then finally, crux, kind of my morning routine. So we are expanding our bulk fuel system. Our director is allowing me to capture all of our state tax refunds and put it into my bulk fuel tank expansion program. So about once a quarter, we get a check from the state tax refund for between $125,000 and $160,000, which basically will pay for a new fuel system somewhere in the state. All of our tanks are ASTs. We're not doing anything below grade. We are left with one below grade tank. It's out in Gateway, Colorado. Our concern with this tank is the dirt that covered it up is radioactive. There's a little uranium out there on the west side of the state, and nobody wants to break the surface and find out what we're up against. They know it's hot. It was hot when they put it in the ground.
So do we get better MPG out of that fuel?
Yeah, the fuel is hot. That tank will probably not be replaced at least as long as I'm here. I'll let someone else take on that. Because if nothing else, though, it would be interesting what they run into. Most, all the AST or the USTs had to be replaced back in '88 to '98. This one was installed in '97, I believe. But yeah, Gateway will be its own separate example of creative environmentalism. Key thing, again, with our bulk fuel is we get away from having one gas station supply our fuel to our trucks. And then finally, we've been contacted by DHS and FEMA for access to our fuel. About that, though, one of our concerns, and we haven't addressed it yet, is many of our rural sites have one source of electricity. So if electricity goes out in town, everything's down. Generally, electricity goes out when we've got a big blizzard. And what we're looking at now, and one of my little projects for the future, is backup generation capability. We're talking about bringing in our power plants or light plants as a source. We've got one at least in every section that we can drag into use if we need to.
Question, so you're talking about backup, so when you're using your Voyager card, mom and pop, and power goes out, and they have no internet, or power that no internet, they can't do transactions.
Correct.
Are they, so you're not be able to get fuel there?
No,
Are
what
they
they're,
giving you the clipboard and pay you later?
yes,
Okay.
that's exactly what they do. And that creates a problem for everybody, because the new dispensers, they have to see a gallon change hands. So we've had this happen where the owner of that store takes his hose, sticks it back into the tank, and pumps 38 gallons back into his own tank, so he has a new receipt. Very strange accounting goes on at that point for the merchant, but I have a ticket showing 18.5 gallons, whatever it might be.
So I'm not sure how often that happens, but that's our concern. If the internet goes out, they won't dispense fuel.
Well, we've had that in this region that runs this area down south, like Trinidad, power went out, they ended up using slip tanks and 1-tons to get fuel down to those guys.
Okay.
Other areas that weren't hit as bad, or weren't experiencing the problems, so that's how we got around the problem, but that's, again, that's not the best thing to be doing in the middle of a storm either, so.
But you gotta have the gas. I mean, that's, but a lot of times, you know, in our, especially in these small towns, the merchants and our drivers are they're pretty good friends, which that creates other opportunities.
Yeah,
Hey, Bob, let me fill my car up.
pretty good friends, brother-in-law, cousin.
Relatives, yeah. So, internet access. So, our fuel masters, and this is where this kind of comes into play. Fuel master, I only talk with the credit card machine once a day, so I don't need regular internet access to it. At night, I upload all our new credit cards or any changes, and then download those transactions as well as tank gauge information, things like that.
So you're not validating your individual transactions to your own fuel section?
No, we are.
Master as they happen?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
So that, I send a list of my fuel pins every night,
right.
as well as the credit card numbers. And so that machine says, okay, that's a good card, that's a good pin, and it's the right product. So, sidebar comment. So we put in a system up in Vale, and the supervisor, and this is, I mean, it was just put in, we hadn't even tested. So he pulls up in his gasoline pickup, puts his card in, no, it's not working. We start jumping through hoops, going, why the hell isn't the system working? We're blaming Fuel Master. Well, then it strikes me, it's a gasoline credit card. Fuel Master will not allow diesel to be pumped into a gasoline truck. Oh, look at that, it works. Yeah, that took us probably 3 hours to figure out we had a gas card against diesel. Ooh, boy, am I on top of things. You think you know a lot, but all of a sudden you are humbled very quickly. One of the things, so this fiber, and this has just recently happened with our new director, and some responsibilities that came over to our Kyle Lester, our director, is CDOT lays fiber up to our tunnels. But the guys who own the fiber, they're CDOT people, their mandate, they were serving their external community first before us. So on top of Wolf Creek Pass, I'm actually having to pirate a wireless signal from Wolf Creek Ski Resort, rather than hop onto the fiber that we own that runs right next to the tank. That's all been changed, and so as we install new systems, we will be using our own fiber for our internet access. Not sure when this will occur, just the wheels of government work kind of slow some days, so. But it's a good thing that will help us out down the road. General idea on our new tanks, that's the blue stars you see up there. These were all, we look at a bunch of different things as we're putting in new tanks. One is the number of gas stations we have available to us, how many transactions, how many different patrols run through there. And then with the local contacts, we help pick these best spots that we need bulk fuel or can take advantage of it. Down by Cortez, Mancus, we're going out to bid today, I think. We put one, Empire is one on the way up to the tunnel. That one is one of our biggest, heaviest duty, heaviest activity barns. I've got 2 fuel dispensers there, so I can fuel 2 trucks at once servicing I-70. It's a big 12,000 gallon tank. CDOT in the past, all my other tanks are anywhere from 500 gallons to 3,000 or 6,000 gallons. which if our distributors, they're gonna charge me as much to bring 7,000 gallons as they charge me for 3. So I'm paying a much higher fee for a 3,000 gallon delivery, as well as more frequent, which during a winter storm, we're calling them out, they're gonna charge me even more for that. So our new fuel tanks are all between 8,000 and 10,000 gallons, so we can get a full load of fuel, and we don't have to order as frequently. Reduction in petroleum fuels, biodiesel in Colorado, and who was, Argonne National Labs just announced a new award to find better fuels for the heavy fleet. It was a $50 million that said, find us a new fuel that's more environmentally friendly. And they've put out all these contracts around the state to help us find something different other than just biodiesel. Biodiesel's got a whole list of properties that are not very user-friendly, I'll use that word. But I'll cover that momentarily. So we're trying to improve our utilization. Again, 1 man versus 2. Trucks being better set up for this. We're also going to be trying to come up with ways to test and evaluate new fuels, whatever those might be. But the big one's going to be biodiesel that we have to work with here. We also need to reduce our GHGs, the greenhouse gases. That's one of the bad things about the biodiesel. It has a much increase of NOx, and that's one of those measurable greenhouse gases that we're responsible to measure. And then finally, the other thing will be cap and trade. That's where you pay a penalty for burning diesel fuel. And that one, from what I saw, some of the California racks, it's about 13 cents a gallon, which is almost 10% of our fuel cost right now, or the base cost. So I'm not sure that's the best way, but California has created almost a slush fund. They have so much money in this cap and trade fund. Now, politicians go, we got money. So it's not going to, when I was reviewing it, Lisa, if I've got this wrong, please correct me, but they can use these cap and trade dollars for anything they deem will improve the environment. And it might be a pedestrian bridge that will save people from walking too far, because if you walk far, you create more greenhouse gas. The things that they were creating, bicycle trails, they're using that money for bicycle trails. They're using it for hospital improvements.
I'll tell you one thing it's not being used for is for us to buy cleaner equipment. That would make too much sense.
Like I say, it does create that slush fund. If it's managed right, great. But with politicians, there's a matter of opinion as to whether it's being spent right. Biodiesel. So one of my problems with biodiesel, there is a product that's available in California. They call it renewable biodiesel. It's basically biodiesel that's been run through a different set of chemical processes that cleans it up a little bit further. Problem is, there's only 2 plants making it. California is sucking up 100% of their production. And so our local folks can't even get that.
Oregon is using it.
Yeah, it's going out there to that West Coast. We don't even get an opportunity, right? He comes and tries to sell the fuel to us, and I go, well, how much do you have? None. Why are you trying to sell it? So it's a reasonable fuel, but right now, our problem, one of our key things that we're going to run into with biodiesel, one, the operational problems. Obviously, it turns into a candle at about 18 degrees. The other side of that, if there's any water, it will start creating bugs in your water, which creates acids in your tank, which will eat your tank lining, whether it's in the truck or it's in the fuel tank that it's stored in. So the housekeeping that you have to do with biodiesel is much more intense. And that's been one of my goals, is to train our people how to take care of the fuel. Sumping the water off of the tank is number one. CDOT had not done that for years. We had a tank officially catastrophically fail down on Laguna Pass. We didn't lose fuel to the environment, but the interior tank failed. And that. They think, they haven't ever cut it open because it's a concrete clad tank, but they think that the water collected around the outside of the external tank and rusted it through. The tank was 23 years old. So it's going to be a big challenge for us. But, you know, with training, kind of like our fuel exceptions, with training, we'll be able to get that managed properly. And it's what's going to have to do.
What's your mandate? What percentage?
Well, we don't have one.
Oh, you don't have no?
No, so what we're looking at is, what I'm looking at is the Minnesota model. Minnesota came out, and it was about 6 or 7 years ago, when they first came out, they said 20% year round. Well, they went out to start the bus on one November morning, and every school bus in the system was shut down. That made them shut down the schools for about 3 days while these things defrosted. So what they came back with is a 5 and 20% of the number 2 diesel. So in the winter, they're running a 70-30 blend, so it's 5% of that 70% or 20% of that 70%. So that's kind of what we're looking at. They've come back, and I've chatted with them, that, and a key thing is proper housekeeping of the fuel. That's going to be for operations, that's going to be the number one, is to keep the water out of the system.
So in Washington, we've been doing biodiesel probably 10 years. So it's 20% year round and 10% on the east side of the state when it gets cold. And it
For
gets-
both grades, if you do a winter grade?
So we do additives, and certainly there's, as you call it, housekeeping. So we're going through more filters, but it's manageable. I can run 10% year round and not see an issue at all. Once you go through your bulk tanks and clean them,
Yes.
the first time when you first do biodiesel, after that, it's manageable. And honestly, I think renewable diesel will be the future. They're looking at a plant in Washington, Cherry Point, to produce renewable diesel. And it doesn't mimic too many properties of biodiesel. It doesn't have the water treatment and all the other good stuff. But biodiesel is doable. Not to say there's not challenges, and the people that say they're running 100% have their tanks are inside the shops at 80 degrees year round. And
Arizona, they're a big proponent of it in Arizona. That's great. Hey, it's a good product. It's got about the same cetanes. It's got good lubricity. I mean, there's good products to biodiesel.
So we ran up to 60% in the summer and had no issues, but we don't do that normally. We're mandated to use 20%, and so we do the best we can statewide to get there.
And we don't have any microphones telling them. Our biodiesel, now one of the other problems you're running into with biodiesel. So biodiesel becomes competitive with a government $1 a gallon tax credit. That expired January 1st of 2018, and it has not been renewed. REG, who makes this renewable fuel, I was looking at their financial statement the other day, and they went from having cash reserves last quarter, whatever their last fiscal reporting, they had $61 million in reserves. The following quarter, they had $41 million. And they're lobbying extensively to get that dollar put back into place, because otherwise their fuel is non-competitive. If they renamed it a farmer subsidy, maybe it had a chance to pass. Because that's what it amounts to. I mean, that's the groups that are fighting for this biodiesel credit. This is the farming community, as well as REG, the guys making biodiesel. But I don't see under our current administration that $1 a gallon being renewed. Grassley's strong, but
So without the $1 a gallon in Washington State, the way we've rebid the contract, our biodiesel at 20% is on par with diesel, the price of diesel. It used to be 15 to 20 cents more, but we took the RINs out, some other bidding, correct.
so do you collect the RINs yourself then?
No, they
Okay, they keep the RINs.
But we have a mandate that 50% of the feedstock comes from Washington State too, so, yeah, there's.
See, and that's a benefit you and California have. We've got one refinery, and they only supply about 30% of our state's fuel. The rest of it comes in from Texas into Montana.
Don't get me wrong, and we are being taped, but I would,
Oh.
I would be happy to get rid of biodiesel.
You know, I'm Larry Jackson. Yeah, it's, yeah, biodiesel, that's gonna be our one thing we can do on heavy equipment to reduce my carbon footprint. We're gonna have an uphill battle because there's a lot of folks, and I'd say I'm part of the old school that I don't trust it. New folks, the younger generation, they're probably more comfortable with it. I've just seen all the negatives for so many years, it's hard for me to bite off onto it.
So we can talk later if you want to do biodiesel, but we have an exemption in places too. So don't get me wrong, mountain passes, so we don't turn the fuel over, we're not doing biodiesel there. One thing just to caution you, when you move to biodiesel, is we were filling loaders up and then the loaders set.
Right.
And so you gotta watch that, and some of your, if you've got radio sites with burning diesel generators, we exempt those too. So you need to turn the fuel, even at 10 to, or 20%, or it will gel.
Yeah, it's kind of some nasty stuff, and we're getting ready to put fuel into a new tank up at Empire, and right now we're gonna have to bid out winter diesel, a 70-30 blend. Even though it's 100 degrees today, that fuel probably won't be consumed until we run into mid-October. And by then,
we additives for the cold point and the cetane and stuff like that. So we leave that up to the vendors to do that, and we don't let our mechanics do that any longer because they were doing the glove method of well, a little is good, but more is better,
Yeah.
which actually is like antifreeze. It reverses, so it freezes
Yeah.
faster.
It's gonna be one of the fun parts of this, but it'll happen.
Missouri DOT has been doing biodiesel, and I would also recommend talking to them because they had some fuel problems beginning, and they have a whole QA process in place. So they're another good resource to talk to, and they've got cold weather.
Well, and it's, for us, one of our big challenges we run into, and it happened, and I saw this happen on Monarch Pass, is we go from 40 degrees in Denver to -12 on top of Eisenhower. And so we have to maintain that change in elevation with the associated temperature. That's where we had trucks in September gel up on, not our trucks, but public trucks, Houghland fuel, matter of fact, gelled up on top of Monarch Pass in September. And so some of those minor operational issues that anywhere north of us or south of us don't ever have to face. But that was an extreme case where we hit Monarch Pass, and it was one of my fuel trucks at the time that gelled up. So you have to send somebody up there with a tent over it, and now you're trying to heat this. And they now have 911, and they've got some things you can pour in the fuel that will liquefy it quick enough to get it back going. Back then, those chemicals weren't ready for us. Credit cards. So we're using the Voyager card now. Very likely, credit cards are going to be a thing of the past. But we're not the driving force behind that. It's the public, the credit card manufacturers, the pump manufacturers that make the crayons. We just kind of have to tag on and accept whatever they're doing. Our volumes are so small compared to the rest of the industry that we really cannot drive any of these results. We have to just take what the public creates. But the new thing, this one thing happens. One of their new terms, zero friction mobile pay. In other words, that's the wave your card in front of the card reader, so you're not wearing the hour. I was like, really, zero friction? Come on. Oh well. So that's what they're calling it. But we are the Voyager. We've been talking with Voyager. We've been talking about what they're going to do, what they see coming up, and they haven't even crossed that bridge yet. Because it's going to be coming, and now we've got 3,000 employees, or I've got 3,000 trucks. How the hell do we manage our fuels? Kind of looking forward, because we have to start setting budgets of how we are going to do stuff down the road. So it's stuff that it's not an immediate issue, but it's something we're going to face down the road.
What does EMV stand for?
Europay, MasterCard, Visa. Those are the people that forced the chips onto your credit cards. This started about 15 years ago, give or take. And so when you put your card in, it actually holds your card. It reads that chip to verify. It keeps you from cloning cards is what it does. But EMV's been around a long time. Officially, October 2020, all the credit card readers and dispensers have to have that capability. There's been a huge resistance to put those into the pumps because you're looking at $20,000 plus per dispenser. So the merchants are very hesitant to put it in. There's also software issues that people are still writing software how to handle these transactions at the dispenser level. So it's, but it is something that's coming down the road. October 2020 has to be in place. Our new Voyager cards, which I'm issuing right now, already have the chip in them. Our concern was they call it chip and pin, that you have the card and you also have a fuel pin or a personal pin. Since we created our own pins, will Voyager's system work with ours? They say it will, but until we see it in practice, I'm still a little concerned about it. These are all things that are going to happen. The chip that's in place. That has to be by law, that's in place. And this was all as a method of eliminating fraud on the part of the card holder or the Visa MasterCard folks. Voyager. So when you have cards stolen and fuel is stolen, if the merchant is following his card issuer or his processor's program, he's not held responsible for that fraud. Voyager, in our case, Voyager reimburses us for that fuel. He's not charged for it. If they do not have this new chip and pin system in place by October 2020, he now accepts all that fraud. Which tells you if you've got some big operators, they're not going to do that. So it will happen. They've now got it just a touch over a year to get them installed, but it will be coming down the road.
And note the last bullet point on your slide there about we need a national standard for the product codes.
Yeah, we have a lot. The challenge that we run into and where the merchants have wrong product codes in there. I've got a merchant just a couple weeks ago changed out his POS and all of a sudden showed we were buying E15. Well, if you put E15 into a new vehicle that's not authorized to run E15, you voided the warranty. And so we have to go back to that individual merchant. Come on, you don't have E15 or do you have it? If you do, we can't buy from you, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, there's things that need to happen, but like I say, we're just a small user when you look at the whole fuel system out there. I think right now CDOT's less than 0.5% of the state's fuel demand. I mean, I like to think my 4 million gallons add up, but not in the whole scheme of things.
We, in the E85 days, we needed to report on how much E85 we wanted to know when we were using E85 as opposed to, what we literally had to do was send a car to a merchant, new E85 merchant, do what we call the pilot fueling, get the receipt, get the product code, and then we kept a list of the product codes for that particular merchant so that we could know. Yeah.
That's ugly. I will say, that's one of the things, Voyager, we have a list of product codes. Individual merchants have to select one of their codes to use. When we see something that's out of whack, such as this E15, that's where you talk to the merchant and not Voyager. But they're also saying one of the things that we're having to address is electricity consumption. We're under a mandate to start pushing out more electric vehicles. We use ChargePoint. They won the bid for the state's charge systems. Voyager does work with them, but so far we haven't activated it. So with our state fleet vehicles, I've got 25 pure electric bolts and things of that nature. I can't see any of their fueling activities or their odometers for that matter. So once a month, and we do it anyways right now, everybody once a month has to go out and take odometer readings off every vehicle. Those 20 vehicles will have to continue doing the manual odometer capture. Down the road, when we get this system in place, it'll eliminate that piece of it. But Yeah, wrong product codes drive us crazy, and then when I'm reporting to our greening government, I'm looking at my snow plows and I see E85, or I see biodiesel, or I see whatever products. I know my snow plow's not burning it. Skimmers, the bane of my existence right now. They're getting more and more creative, using Bluetooth to capture credit cards. There is an app on, iPhone's got an app, some kid developed it. You can take your phone up to it, and if there's a Bluetooth skimmer inside the dispenser, it'll tell you that there's a Bluetooth transmitter. Won't tell you what it's doing, but it'll tell you if there's one inside the pump.
And you get chewed out for having your phone by a fuel pump.
Yeah, you're supposed to have all your electronics shut down. You've all seen the little red decals, turn off all cell phones, turn off all electronics. And I was teaching class up at our training academy about fuel last year, and everybody, the videos of people seeing static electricity fires at gas pumps, too many to even count them all. Women are the worst contributors to fuel pump fires because they sit in their dress. It has enough motion in that dress to create static electricity. They get up and they touch that dispenser and it sets off a fire. So of all these fuel fires that I've seen and both online and in person, probably 80% of them are women. The other ones are dumbasses lighting a cigarette up by the gas station. And then small piece of it are the RVs that show up with a pilot light lit to keep their hot water heater running. And that categorizes all those fuel fires. So that, I believe, does it for me.
I had, Bob stepped out, but because I wanted him to hear this, was about how you're using the GPS coordinates of the vehicle and you're matching that with the fueling location. And then I was gonna ask about, do you have any camera, when you're putting in your new fuel stations or at your existing ones, do you have any cameras that are reading the license plate to confirm that the right vehicle is getting fueled or any of those kinds of things?
No, and it's been one of the things that I've asked Fuel Master to do is put a camera inside their cartridge so I can see the person. To me, that's more important than the truck. And as I tell everybody, trucks don't steal from me, people do. And so I want to know the person doing it as opposed to the equipment. But to your first question, the ABL system, that is a combination of merging that in. It gets way too computer for me, but we take the ABL system from Zonar. We get the location from Voyager, we send it to Zonar. They match up the Zonar where that truck is stopped. And so that's where they do the match and then it comes back to us. How that magical works is,
So there's no like fuel ring or something that activates, like the GPS system says, okay, I know that somebody's fueling?
No, it's, they're able to determine, Zonar's able to determine that vehicle is stopped.
So it's just looking at unstopped and I'm getting fuel.
And we match up a fuel location with it, because we've got the timestamps for both of them, and you can match them up pretty easily. It's pretty reliable, and we do that because when we had that big fraud, that's what was happening. So their truck was parked someplace else, and they brought in one of their other trucks with tanks in the back that they filled up. And so the card and the station weren't matched up.
What's kind of funny is it's happened a couple times, and probably more than I know, but I know of a couple times where people will fill up at a station, but that station is owned by somebody out in Nebraska or Kansas, and the address matches that pings the place out in Kansas, not the one in Colorado, so that throws a fuel exception report saying this person fueled outside of Colorado, when in fact the ABL says, no, they were right here.
No, we're here, yeah. And yeah, that's an out-of-state transaction, and I've put in methods for us to address that. Voyager will not, because Voyager is owned by US Bank, and it's a federally chartered bank, there's certain things they can't do with their information. And one, they can't change that merchant's address. They won't do it. As much as I can complain to them saying, in Salt Lake, there's a big processing center there. Come and Go, who's a big C-store operator here, they just got bought by a company out of Pennsylvania, actually England, but they operate in Pennsylvania. And so our Come and Goes, which there's probably 100 of them in the state easily, their merchants are all over, they're all over the place. And so that's just one of those things that, you know, out-of-state merchant processed or purchased locally, processed out-of-state is I think how we call that exception. But that's what happens. And when I see an out-of-state transaction, that's one of the things. So today or yesterday, I saw a purchase in Denver, Montana. Like, really? Didn't know there was a Denver, Montana. No, it's not. So, but turns out the transaction, that's just their pre-authorization address. When that transaction actually came through, it was proper address, proper state. So, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.